Frank Yerby's. Judas, my brother. Chapter 12. I stood there beside the windlass, watching for my strongest workmen, 2 to each side, wrestling with the huge crossbars that turned the winch, slowly coiling the rope as thick as a man's arm about it. They were a sight to see, their great black bronze biceps nodding like gigantic pythons, the sweat on their bodies glistening as they bent that rope round and around the bowl of the windlass, so that the immense rough-hewn block of stone lifted, borne aloft on Rope Creek, timber-grown, until it was high enough for the stonemasons atop the rapidly growing arches of my and Pilatus's aqueduct to catch it with their grappling hooks, swing it in toward the top of the arch itself, then signal the winchmen to slacken off on the windlass far below, and allow the stone to thud into place. It was going well. I was pleased with it. To be the engineer in charge of the greatest work ever seen in Judea, for my aqueduct would be all of 400 stadia long by the time we'd finished it, was no little thing. And not the least of my satisfactions lay in the circumstances that since we were bringing the water down to Jerusalem from the pool of Solomon, which lay very near the village of Bethlehem, the city of David, from whence the prophecy said the Messiah was to come, I was, and would be, for some considerable time, out of the reach of Claudia's hot little hands, and by that very token, safe from the risk of her utter recklessness, would force Pilatus to loose a hired assassin upon me. I use the word force deliberately. I honestly don't believe that Pilatus would have cared if Claudia had worked her way horizontally through every cohort of the legions, so long as her activities did not interfere with his progress towards the Imperator's throne. But he would be forced to have me, whom he was genuinely fond of, killed, because should it be noised abroad that his wife, the at least semi-divine Claudia, was cuckolding him with a provincial, and what was even worse, a Jew, the gale of laughter sweeping from one end of the empire to the other would scatter his ambitions before it like so much chaff. Only by my death could he then regain his dignity, command the respect of men, resume his march toward the rulership of the world. This ironical set of circumstances seemed to me an insanely ignoble reason to die, to be cut down over a chit of a girl who represented, from my weary point of view, only the nightly use of a commodity I could have procured with much less bother. Though that I could have found Claudia's peer in enthusiasm, expertness, and single-minded devotion to sheer carnality, I pay her the sincere and respectful compliment of doubting. In any of the better luminaries of Tiberias or Caesarea, and at the orders of a man who'd stifle a yawn with the back of his hand as he gave them, made the whole thing singularly unappealing. If die I must, and for no such noble cause as my people's freedom, let it, at the very least, be for love. I was thinking about all this when I saw the horseman coming toward me. Of course, my Decapolian guards stopped him long before he got even within bowshot of my precious hide. They had their orders from Pilatus, for once again it was clear that the Epitropus had his reasons for believing my life in danger. His first act upon his return to Caesarea from Jerusalem had been to inform me flatly that under no circumstance whatsoever, not even to visit my parents, was I to enter the holy city, although he should begin work upon the aqueduct. We should begin work upon the aqueduct near Bethlehem of Judea, only a few millia away, and his second, to place the two burly Italians once again before my bedroom door, where they stayed until I had, again at the procurator's orders, left Caesarea under heavy guard to begin work in Judea. Those two brawny members of the cohors Italica, whom Pilatus had provided for my protection during my last days in Caesarea, remained a nagging, aching source of worry to me. For unless they were stone blind, between 3 and 4 o'clock of every morning that I was obliged to linger at Caesarea, they had seen Claudia, wrapped in a silken robe made of cobwebs and moon mist for all the concealment it provided her lovely body, parading not furtively but proudly like a queen she was in some ways, into my chamber, after having waited that long to make sure the brew of poppy seeds with which she had dosed Pilatus's wine had had the desired effect, and unless they were hopelessly deaf, they had heard what they had heard. I hope with all my heart that they were tongueless mutes, or had the wit to pretend to be, which last, be it said, wasn't at all unlikely. Romans born, they'd long since learned how dangerous it was to their own continued existence to let their tongues wag about the amatory escapades of the great. But now, one of the Decapolines, who had detained the horsemen, came up to me and saluted smartly. "It's a man of some rank, sir," he said, "to judge by his dress, by race of your people, though he speaks Greek better than I do. Says he's a friend of your father's, and that you would recognize him. Shall we permit him to pass?" "Yes, Decurion," I said slowly, "but under guard until I've seen whether or not he's telling the truth. This work's not popular, you know." "Don't I, though?" the Decurion laughed. "But I wouldn't worry about that if I were you, sir. We took very good care of those beggars in Jerusalem." I wondered what the devil he meant by that, but I didn't ask him. It was absolutely necessary to impose some respect for my position, if not for my person, upon those Jew-hating Greeks of the Decapolis' court. And one of the basic rules for maintaining discipline among men more or less under your command is not to talk to them beyond the giving of direct orders, to enwrap yourself in lofty dignity, to keep apart. A few minutes later, the Decurion came back again, leading the visitor's horse. The man, in his vigorous middle years, rode surrounded by a glittering forest of spears. My Decapolians were being zealous, to say the least. But then I saw who he was, and leaped down from my high perch beside the windlass, ran to his horse, took his hand, and kissed it with real respect. At the sight of that, the legionaries fell back. "Leave us," I said. Joseph ha Arimathea climbed down from his beautiful Arabian, and took me in his arms. "God make the light of his countenance to shine upon you, Nathan," he said, "and grant you peace." "Amen," I said, "and upon you, likewise, respected friend of my father." He glanced at my clean-shaven face disapprovingly. I raised a hand to the indecent nakedness of my cheeks and chin. "It is necessary for the moment, my master," I said. "And as soon as this work is done, I'll be able to return to the dress and customs of my people. I hope forever." "Good," he said. "Nathan, I have come at your father's request, and also of my own free will, to warn you. This work is highly unpopular in Jerusalem, even among us, even among your own." That surprised me. I'd taken it as a matter of course that the Prussian, with their maddening concern with every vowel point of the law, would oppose it, and that the extremists among them, the zealots, for the zealots were not, as some have written, a separate party from the Pharisees, but were themselves Pharisees, differing only from their fellows in their advocation and use of violence, would carry that opposition to the point of drawing steel, but that my father's party, the Zadokим and Sadducees, being the pragmatists that they were, would raise their voices against so obviously necessary a thing as supplementing Jerusalem's pitifully scanty water supply, astonishing me. I said as much to Joseph Arimathea. "You're right, as far as you go, Nathan," he said. "The aqueduct is necessary, and from that standpoint will be a blessing to the city. But when in our history has the necessary taken precedence over the holy?" "I don't understand you, sir," I said. "Don't you know how and where Pilatus got the money to finance this work, my boy?" Joseph said. "No," I said. "He seized the Orban," Joseph Arimathea said quietly. I stood there speechless. The Korban was not the ordinary temple treasure, but a special fund for purposes so sacred that only the high priest and his council in the Sanhedrin knew what they were. The word itself means secret or taboo. "But why?" I said. "He could have used the ordinary temple funds. There is a Mishnah which states that they may be used for public works, specifically including aqueducts, if I remember right." "I know, but apparently your friend Pilatus considered the ordinary fund insufficient." "There wasn't any trouble." "There was, Nathan." I could hear Joseph's voice thickening with pure rage. "I'm happy to learn that you begin this work without knowing that. By the way, I should like you to take your sacred oath before me now to that effect." "By the ineffable name, I swear it," I said at once. "That is the most awful oath any Jew can take." "But why did you require of me my oath, sir?" "Because," Joseph said sternly, "people were killed, Nathan. A good many people. He, your very good friend, the procurator, was so very well prepared that there's a rank odor of treachery about the whole affair. He had enough soldiers dressed in civilian garb and hiding clubs beneath their robes among the mob to turn the mutiny into a near massacre within minutes. They clubbed the people down, splattered their blood and brains upon the walls of the Antonia, on the cobblestones of the streets. Dozens more were trampled to death by their fellows in the wild rush to escape Pilatus's murderers. In my life, I don't recall having seen a more horrible sight." "Master," I said quietly, "is it being said that I informed him of the proposed mutiny?" "Yes." "Why, yes, of course. Or it was. Your father and I silenced that rumor by submitting to the Sanhedrin, when that august body was on the point of ordering your arrest, a letter from your uncle providing that for weeks before the event you lay at death's door in the praetorium at Caesarea, a prisoner of the Romans, and hence couldn't possibly have even known what was going on in Jerusalem. Unfortunately, the effect of the letter was somewhat lessened by your uncle's over-scrupulous inclusion of the fact that it was Shimeon Zelotes who stabbed you." "Over a private matter," I said. "Your mutual rivalry for the favors of the harlot, Shelomoth," Joseph Arimathea said dryly. "You wouldn't have wanted us to introduce that in evidence, would you, Nathan?" "Yes," I said. "I love Shelomith. I was prepared to marry her. There is," Joseph said, "to quote your father, no worse fate than that of having been born a fool." I bent my head, looked up again. "One," I said quietly, "that of being, or even seeming a traitor." "I agree," Yusuf said, "but no one accuses you of that anymore. Now they say the reason the Epitropos wears the adornments you've placed upon his forehead with such easy grace is he finds the information which the Lady Claudia obtains from you while sharing your pillow so valuable that—" "Ha!" I said, "they flatter me. What secrets of state am I supposed to have possession of? And if they knew anything about Claudia, they'd know—" "What, Nathan?" he said quietly. Too quietly, which should have warned me. But my father was right. There is nothing worse than being a fool. "That she never wastes time in talk, or leaves me breath enough to—" Then I saw his eyes. "So," he whispered, "it's true." I bent my head and said, "Oh, Sheol." "Nathan," he said then, "I bear a command from your father, a formal command that you yourself have just made unconditional. You're to wed, as soon as this work is done. I don't suppose you could leave it, could you?" "Yes," I said, "at the expense of being hung from, or maybe even nailed to, a cross." "I thought as much." "All right, but as soon as you've finished this, you're to return to Galilee. Your father doesn't want you in Jerusalem until the anger touching your involvement with the procurator and the scandal over your relations with his wife have died down. During that time, he or your uncle will have found you a bride, if either can encounter a family who can support your reputation sufficiently to give you their daughter. Which is why you are also free to find a wife for yourself, providing her Jewishness and her morals are above all question. But within a year you must be betrothed, if not wed. Since, as your father says, your hot blood leads you forever into folly, why not cool it honorably and to some purpose? You've something to say to that, my boy?" I bent my head, stared at the ground. I knew where Shulamith was by then, in that little house covered with climbing roses just outside of Caesarea, where nightly the decurion Telemachus. I looked at Yusuf ha Arimathea then. "Tell him I hear and obey," I said. Thereafter, a madness fell upon me. I drove my men without mercy to the degree they probably would have mutinied but for one thing. I worked with them, with my own hands, outdid them all at the murderous tasks of chipping away at the stones with hammer and chisel, especially those which had to be carefully shaped to fit into the arches, their long sloping sides keying into one another to hold the entire U-shaped bridging up, winching them upward, swinging them into their final resting places, carrying sand and mortar on my back, all of which I did like the commonest laborer, to their unmitigated astonishment and delight. What this strenuous work did to my but barely post-convalescent body was nothing short of astonishing. I had always been slim and strong, but now I became a miniature Hercules. I grew no taller, because I was past the age for natural growth, but I broadened until I took on the look of one of the professional wrestlers of the games, and because I greatly feared that the great thews with which I had roped and burdened my body would greatly diminish my speed and skill at the one warlike exercise I knew, that of retiaris, I commanded certain of my guards to meet me in practice with imitation weapons. To my delight, my speed had lessened but little, while my strength, my endurance, had at least tripled. The Decapolians, who had thought me mad to work like a Canaanite slave, a among the laborers, and who had all but openly laughed at me for it, now saw the result, and ceased to smile. I beat them all, even their best swordsmen, with mocking ease. Whereupon one of the youngest and slimmest of their officers, the decurion Aristides, offered to teach me the art of sword and shield play, Lenista style, if, in return, I'd teach him the retiarius' art. I leaped at the chance, and thereby acquired the one thing needful to make me a leader of the people when the zealots, in their mad folly, forced the Romans into war. That is, a full and rounded command of the use of arms, for beyond swordplay I could and did train myself secretly and apart with the light armored troopers' weapons, the javelin, the bow, and the sling. The work went on until toward the end of the 14th year of the reign of Tiberius. We'd brought our arches to within sight of Jerusalem. I never ventured there, thus obeying the procurator's orders and my father's, which had the accidental effect of reinforcing one another. Although I could look down longingly upon the twinkling oil lamps of the city, I slept in a tent under the stars. One night, Aristides, who had become my trusted companion and my friend, came to me. "My lord," he said, keeping his voice low, but not so low I could hear the note of astonished delight in it, "there's a woman outside the camp, asking for you. By Aphrodite, what a creature! Hair so long she has to loop it over one arm to keep from sweeping up the sand. A pair of tits bursting out from her tunic hips." "I know," I said, forcing the words out through the strangling in my throat, the constriction in my lungs, the pain in me like a death stab to my gut. "Go tell her that by Sheol and Gehenna both, I mean by black Hades and Tartarus, She said I was to give you this," Aristides said. I took the little scroll, carried it over to my lamp. She had written it herself. The formation of the letters was atrocious. She'd also left out the vowel points, so that some of the words could have meant any of 3 or 4 different things. I've often thought of inventing extra letters for the vowel sounds, as in Greek, so that the Aramaic and the Hebrew could cease to be at times maddening code ciphers that they were. But how could I get my ultra-conservative people, and especially our scribes, who have a vested interest in our languages, difficulties, to adopt them? Only one thing about her letter was clear, that she had been crying when she wrote it. It was plentiful, blotched, and splattered with what could only have been her tears. I puzzled my head over it. Finally, I got it to make sense by quite arbitrarily reading into some of Shulamith's incomprehensible hen-scratchings meanings that accorded with the parts I actually could decipher. I read, "My own, if you don't come to me, I shall die. And maybe if you do, you will kill me. Better that way. By your sweet hand, I..." Here a long phrase impossible to decipher. "Gladly." I read it as, "From your sweet hands I would accept death gladly, or would consider death a gift, or a boon, or some other such rubbish." The rest of it was the word "please," repeated 10 times, followed by a phrase that surely meant "come to me," and that by a line written with the greatest care, startlingly different from the rest, though I could see it was still her hand. "I love you, Nathan. Your Shalom." There were no explanations in it, no word as to how or why or even if she had the Decurion Telemarcos had left the Decurion Telemarcos. No hint of how in Satan's name she'd come to Judea. Nothing. I sat there a long time, staring at the letter. A long time, a very long time. I said aloud, because afterward Aristides told me he heard me, "Fool! Fool! Fool! Idiot! Ass! Braying ass! Who?" Then I put on my cloak and went. Aristides went with me, which made no difference. I don't think she even saw him, was so much as aware of his existence, much less his presence. I stood there with my arms held rigidly down at my sides and stared at her by the light of the torch that Aristides held. There was no moon at all, nor any stars. The night was overcast. But for the Decurion's torch, I could not have seen her. I stood there, and inside my veins my blood was screaming, the way a prisoner screams when the torturers are at him. My skin burned alive from the tactile memories crawling all over it, from blind madness, from blind, mindless, will-less recall of how every inch of her felt. My mouth hurt, tormented past all bearing by both memory and desire, savoring the taste of her, that wild, sweet venom, whose absence was draining me of manhood, of life. My head went dizzy from her perfume, from her own absolute, maddening, tart, hot, feral female smell. My father had it right. I am a fool. I put out my arms to her. I heard the sob tear her throat as though it were clawing her entrails upward through her mouth. Then she was in my arms and climbing all over me, kissing me every place she could reach, grinding the barrier of our clothing into her own flesh and into mine, so that afterward I found actual lacerations on my hide from the terrible, agonizing, and real, I swear it, hunger of her embrace. And all the time she was crying. Her mouth tasted like the waters of Lake Asphaltides do in Ab, hot and briny, a little sulphuric, the mouth of a damned creature escaped for one brief moment from the pit. I was aware then that darkness had fallen between us. Jerking my head, I saw Aristides' torch bobbing away toward the camp. He had left us alone. The fool. The dear, kind, romantic fool. Shulamith's voice was a sea surf in my ears, a rush of foaming, briny waters. "Come," she was saying. "Come with me. Over there. Those trees. It's darker. Come." I took her by the arm, walked over the warm sand, the scale rock toward the trees. A tiny animal, a lizard, surely made a skittering. There was no other sound except the rasp of our breathing, the rustle of our clothing. We reached the trees. I turned to her, said, "Shulamith," and hands caught my wrist, jerking my arms almost from their sockets, twisted them behind me. I exerted all my newly acquired strength, tore free of my assailant, slammed my fist down to my belt, closed it around the hilt of my sika, held it there for a broad-bladed gladius. A sword was already pressing into my throat. A half-dozen spear points bit my flesh simultaneously, and not fatally or even deeply, but enough to bring blood, to convince me that to try to fight was folly, suicidal folly. "Tie the Roman-loving little bastard up," a great voice said. We rode down a rocky, dried-up stream bed, and then southward toward the Dead Sea. The cords binding my arms bit into my flesh, but they'd assumed I could ride because they hadn't tied me in the high, pummeled desert rover's saddle. Ahead of me, a burly brigand pounded southward at a gallop, tugging at the bridle of my mount, who followed him as the wind follows a driven cloud. We were in desert country now, because of the hoofbeats became noiseless, muffled by the drifting sands. I made it a point of honor to hold myself erect, ride like a prince instead of a bound captive. I wondered how, in what manner they would kill me. I hoped that I'd die well, without crying out. But I doubted it. From their Roman masters, such brigands as these had learned too well the art of inflicting pain. More likely, they'd have me screaming like a woman in childbirth before half an hour was up. Then toward the east, the night broke loose from the edge of the world, and a pale pearl-gray band stole up from the great sea, yellowed, grew bright. Now I could distinguish Shulamith among this pack of desert wolves. She rode a snow-white mare. Her hands were bound. She had her head up as though to sniff the air. She rode proudly, like a queen. I was still watching her when the long, low, sprawling black humps of the tents came in sight. We pounded up to them on those tireless desert shores. A great shrill and gabble of women and piping of children boiled out to meet us. The warriors pulled up their steeds, leaped down. I was surrounded. The women peered at me timidly. Some of them were calmly. All of them had their faces unveiled. When I saw why, they were Jewish, not Bedouin. Some of them, I saw from their features, fineness, had been gently born, city-bred. The children stared at me with the eyes of owls. Their soft little mouths made great O's in their burnt black desert faces. They were beautiful children, well-fed, sturdy, strong, a race to make the Romans tremble when they'd come of age. Then the leader came toward me. He was short, only a little taller than I am, but at least twice as broad. He had a thick, squared-off, night-black beard. His great bowl of a chest bared to the morning sun, was covered with hair, like a beast's. His muscles made the ones I was so proud of appear the products of starvation, of some wasting disease by comparison. His hair was short and curly. He wore a single heavy golden earring in the lobe of his left ear, but none in his right. I wonder what, if anything, that meant. His weapons were Roman, stolen or wrested from some legionary. Wrested, surely, for no man could stand up to this earth-broad Colossus, this Heracles, and live. Nathan Bar Yehuda, he boomed in a voice that was great as the rest of him. I give you greetings, and pray that you accept our hospitality. For how long? I said bitterly. Until you can erect a cross or build a fire. Until you can erect a cross or build a fire? I asked. He looked at me and loosed the dark thunder of his laughter. Neither, by Sheol, he said. You'll find that we'll treat you right tenderly. For one thing, we had of Shimeon how you spared his life when you had it in your power to revenge yourself on him for the scratch he gave you. For another, dead. You're but another lump of fly-blown, stinking carrion, vulture food. Alive, you're worth your weight in gold. You mean ransom, I said. My father's far from rich, and my uncle... Don't be a fool, Bar Yehuda, he said. We're zealots. We don't pray on our own. But will not the Epitropus pay us well to return him the one man in all Judea who can complete his watercourse? Or better still, he looked around until he found Shulamith, and grinned at her with jovial malice. Will not the Lady Claudia urge him to pile up the talents so that her lover can return to her bed? I saw Shulam's lips grow white. If I had desire or need of vengeance for that treachery, I had it then. So you'll write the Epitropus a letter, Bar Yehuda, another to the little Claudia. Now there's a bit of dainty tale I'd have you share with me. That one will be a cunning missive, penned in goat's blood, enclosing the finger of another captive, with that ring you're wearing on it. But you we will not harm. You're our guest, our honored guest. In fact, you can have Shalom for your bedmate. I'll send her to you come dark, bearing with her a whip for you to beat her with. Treacherous little bitch, isn't she? But don't beat her too hard, or you'll make her useless. Do those cords hurt? I'll cut them loose if you'll swear by the name not to try to escape. I swear it by the name, I said. He came and cut me loose, helped me down from my mount. I stood there, rubbing my half-paralyzed arms. Might I know your name, good captain? I said. Of course. It's Yeshua's, he said. Now the name Yeshua, he who saves, or as some interpret it, the help of Yahweh, is a common one among us. It is but a variant of the Hebrew name Yehoshua, which in your tongue would be Joshua. But somehow I couldn't help resenting this great Thude, animals having the same name as him I loved. Yeshua what? I said. God knows, he laughed. Most people call me Son of the Father. Probably because I never had one. Or if I did, his name was Legion. Are you hungry, Bar Yehuda? Very, Barabbas, I said. In fact, I'm starving. The mid-morning meal consisted of huge slabs of roasted sheep, served dessert style, and washed down with endless flagons of wine. While I ate, Shulamith sat apart, staring at me. She picked at her food listlessly. I saw no single morsel of it reach her mouth. Her face was utterly wretched. She seemed to be fighting back her tears. For dessert we had clean locusts, broiled in wild honey. They were delicious, though I had to close my eyes to get the first one down. After that, they took me to a great tent. In it was a table with writing materials already on it. I offered no resistance, but wrote as they told me to. What cared I if Pilatus had to loosen his purse strings in order to buy my freedom? And as for the letter to Claudia, written in my purest Greek, employing the blood of a freshly slaughtered goat as ink, my resentment over the casual way she'd used my body as an instrument for achieving pleasure caused me to make a little masterpiece of it. The blood I was writing with, this, I told her, was drawn from my opened veins. I was being submitted to the most fiendish of tortures. I hoped she would not despise me when she saw how hideously I'd been scarred. There was among them, of course, one who knew enough Greek to vouch for the fact that I'd made no trickery of either missive. Then Yeshua bar Abbas demanded of me my ring. "Look, good chieftain," I said, "you really aren't going to cut off a man's finger in order to—" "Yes," he said cheerfully, "but don't you worry about it, Bar Yehuda. He won't feel a thing. Bastard up and died on me this morning, before we could get out of him where he had his silver hid." That night, as Bar Abbas had promised me, Shelomith came to my tent. Also, as promised, she had a great whip in her hands. Tremblingly, she held it out to me. I shook my head, said no. And she, "Please, Nathan." "You want me to beat you?" I said. "Yes. Oh, yes. I'd feel less filthy then, Nathan. Sorry," I said. "I won't oblige you. And you may go back to wherever you came from. I don't soil my flesh with other men's leavings. Offal, treacherous offal at that." She stood there and took that, and she didn't cry. Instead, she whispered, "Nathan." And I, warily, "Yes, Shelomith." But she didn't answer me. She couldn't. The tears exploded from her eyes. In the lamplight, they looked like yellow diamonds, like a spray of stars. A low, keening ululation came from her throat. "Oh, for God's sake," I said. "Nathan," she said, shredding my name upon the pulsations, the torn thrustings of her breath. "You and Claudia, tell me it's not so. Tell me that, even if you lie." I looked at her, remembered that little house with the roses climbing all over it, the house near Caesarea, the house where she and Telemarcos. The rage that tore me was all the more hurtful for being cold. "Yes, of course it's true," I said. "Why not?" Her hands went beneath her cloak, came out with that knife. Then she was kneeling before me, with it lying across the palms of her hands like a votive offering. "Take it," she said harshly, "and kill me, Nathan. Finish killing me, I mean, because you already have. Do for me what you do for any coursing hound bitch of yours who came home dragging her guts on the ground, out of her belly, where a boar had ripped her open. That's what it feels like. And I can't do it myself now. I haven't the right to anymore. If I could, I would. But I can't." I stared at her. "You want to die?" I said. "Because I lay with Claudia? With one girl child, while you—" "It's not the same," she stormed. "It isn't, Nathan. I'm dirt. What I do with this ruined, rotten carcass doesn't count, as long as I'm not in it then. I told you that once, and I never am, except with you. Never, Nathan. What I had with you was holy, and now you... "Oh, Elohim and Adonai both," I said. "You've dirtied it. With her. So kill me. Don't leave me hurting like this. Don't leave me to go through life dragging my guts on the ground with my insides screaming, 'cause I hurt so. I hurt. I tell you, I hurt. I hurt. Shalom, for the love of God," I said. "No, for the love of you, who were getting to be more him every day, so that the light was always there on your forehead, and you were more shining bright, angel, beautiful, like he is every minute, and I didn't even need to tell you apart anymore. You had no right to dirty that, Nathan. To smear the spit of her filthy kisses all over your Yeshua's face. Her rotting bitch stink over your angel flesh. You, who were the Yeshua I could have, who could belong to me, had no right to. I hit her then, as hard as I could, open palmed across her mouth, her head jerked sideways. A thread of scarlet from where her great warm, wonderful lips broke against her teeth stole diagonally down across her chin's tremble. She bent her head and cried hoarsely, terribly, looked up at me and said, "Kill me. It's easy, Nathan. Like a she-goat. You put the blade here, and I, who was already killed." She couldn't understand that, comprehend the death in me, the utter weariness. I couldn't explain to her, in a way she could grasp, that the only thing worse than rejection is substitution. Far, far worse. This poor, dumb little bitch couldn't perceive my horror at the very idea of being used as an icon, an image of flesh, to be inhabited through her longing, her imagination, her need, by another soul. Unlike her, I couldn't escape my body. For good or ill, I was always its indwelling Gnostic host, though not entirely its master, even when it was engaging with Claudia in acts that have no name and are utterly vile. So I couldn't make room for it, for her love-lust longing sculptured idol of Yeshua ha-Notzri. My body was not meant, or even fit, to be a shrine. "No," I said, the weariness, the death in me, drowning, stifling, sinking into primordial soundlessness my voice. "If you want to die, you'll have to do it yourself. I won't stop you. I don't think anybody ought to be stopped considering what life's like, what it is. But you can't ask me to become a murderer in order to arrange the mess you've made of your life. It wouldn't be murder. To kill a bad, hurt she-dog is a kindness, Nathan, a mercy. I'll write that down. I'll tell them why." "No," I said. Her eyes turned inward, then, as she considered the matter. "I can't kill him," she said, talking to herself, not to me. "I can't kill my little Yeshua, because I'm going to name him that no matter what Telemarcus says." I sat down. I had to. I couldn't stand up any more. "You mean that you're with child, yes. I wanted him to be yours, Nathan. Only they, Telemarcos and your Claudia, the filthy little bitch, told me what would happen to you if I stayed with you. How your family would disown you. How nobody'd give you work. How you'd starve, all because of me. And they were right. That's what makes it so awful." I didn't say anything. What can you say to the truth? To that kind of cur-dog, belly-groveling truth? Except that it represents surrender of yourself, of what you are, of everything in you that makes you a man. And castration, my friends, however it's done, is vile. So I went away with Telemarcos. He's a good man, Nathan. He's kind to me. I could be happy if it weren't for you." "You mean if it wasn't for Yeshua," I said. "No, you. Because you're human, sort of. You could be mine, if people would leave us alone. But Yeshua I could never have, because he's—" "What?" I said. "An angel. A real one, I mean. I don't think that Carpenter was his father. I think that an angel, or God himself, came down, and I couldn't let that blasphemous nonsense pass. that Hellenistic reduction of Almighty God into a rutting swine like your Zeus, Roman Jupiter, as low as man, having attributes no more divine than animal lust. I said, using the literal, filthy gutter words, the utterly obscene equivalent of, and had sexual intercourse with Miriam. But she wasn't shocked. She said, no, just touched her with his hand, just sort of hovered over her in a cloud of light. And then he, Yesu, was there in her womb without all the sweat and stink and panting and ugliness, tiny and pure and angel beautiful, with all the sin left out. Mine, too, sort of. Shalom, I said. 'Cause when Telemarcos and I were doing that, I knew we were making him. I knew it, Nathan. So I prayed to God to make him look like you and be like Yeshua. She was mad, of course, but madness is sometimes beautiful. I wonder if sanity ever is. Then I said, if you were so content with your Greek paramour, why did you leave him? I didn't, Nathan. That big wild boar bear Abbas dragged me off. Had it all planned like the kind know how to do only too well. Waited until Telemarcus had left the house to stand guard before the procurator's palace, then came bursting in. Shimeon Zalatis had told the big bastard you were crazy over me, so he threatened to kill me if I didn't betray you into his hands this way. I told him to go ahead, that I'd die first, so he put his knife against my belly, swore he'd disembowel me. They do that, you know. The zealots, I mean. Open women up from the crotch to the navel, let everything spill out. Mostly women who've lain with Roman soldiers. Women like me. But I was already 2 weeks overdue for the second month in a row. I remembered that. Remembered my little Yeshuas. I put my arms around her then. Poor Shalom, I said. Poor little Shelomith. She stayed there with me until it was drawn. Until it was dawn. Until the sun came up like a shofar blast over the bitter lake. That lifeless sea. I didn't touch her in that way. I had not the slightest desire to. That was over now. Forever over between the two of us. Somehow, on that dreadful night, we'd killed it. Chapter 13. When I came out of my tent the next morning, I went in search of Barabbas. I found him readily enough, for I was guided to the place he was by the clash of arms and his own bull-roaring. He was training the boys. He'd assembled all those sturdy little beggars between bar mitzvah age and 17, I guessed, and was making them fight each other in companies. They were armed with wooden swords and leather shields. I stood there watching and shook my head. The way he was training them, he would never beat the Romans. He saw me and came up to me with a white-toothed grin, flashing pearls amid the sooty midnight of his beard. "Well, Bar Yehuda," he roared. He always roared. I don't think he even knew how to talk quietly. "What do you think of my Jewish Liberation Army?" I looked him straight in the eye and told him the strict and bitter truth. They're hopeless. A Roman decuria could sweep a cohort of men trained like this off the face of the earth. His brows crashed together over his broad, blunt nose. I half expected to hear a thunderclap. "You're saying," he bellowed, "that my training is poor? Worse than that, it's dangerous. They'd fight better without it." He glared at me. "You could do better, I suppose," he said. "Yes," I said. He grinned at me. Then a savage grin, filled with unholy glee. "Prove it," he said. "Prove it how?" I said. "Meet me in single combat. Sword and shield. Spears, daggers, anything. What say you, Bar Yehuda?" "Done," I said at once, and grinned back at him. That disconcerted him. He had expected fear. He half turned. "Wait," I said. He looked at me, out from under his shaggy brows. I could see why Shulamith called him a wild boar. "I'd advise you not to assemble the people," I said quietly, "and to send these boys away." He glared at me, and his nostrils twitched. "I'd already learned they did that when he doubted your word, suspected treachery." "Why?" he said. "Because I have no desire to become the leader of this band of brigands," I said evenly. "And when your people see how badly I'm going to beat you, they may insist upon that. Your authority rests upon your reputation as a fighter, Barabbas. I'd not rob you of it." "By Sheol," he bellowed, "I've met some nervy little bastards in my time, but you—" I grinned at him. "You haven't asked me what weapons I want," I said. "All right. What weapons do you?" "A fishnet, a dagger, and a trident." He shook his head. "Impossible. We're not fisher folk. What use would we have for—" "Then a spear, 4 square rods of tent cloth, and a dagger," I said. He studied me. "You'd hold me to fighting with this mountebank's combination of yours?" he said. "No," I told him. "I'd prefer that you came to meet me fully armed. Breastplate, buckler, shield, sword, spear, 2 if you like." "A spear? No," he growled. "Beyond throwing it or holding it out to break a charge, a spear's no good. Now come with me." "Where?" I said. "To the camp. To the center. Where everybody can see me eat you alive, Bar Yehuda." "That's not wise, Chief," I told him. "When the people see—" "Oh, faces," he said. "Come on." When I went into my tent, Shulamith was asleep. But as I stripped off my clothing and prepared a loincloth, after all, there would be Jewish women watching this contest, not Roman matrons nor Greek hetairai. She woke up and stared at me. "Nathan," she whispered. Then her face turned green. She leaped up, staggered through the opening, and started to vomit. I came to her at once, took her arm. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes, but her smile was a glory. "There," she said triumphantly. "That proves it. I am." I managed a sickly grin. You see, I'd thought she was concerned about me. And then she saw how I was dressed, or rather how I wasn't dressed. "Nathan," she breathed, you're going to fight somebody?" "Yes," I said peacefully. "Barabbas." "Oh, Nathan, no," she wailed. "He's made out of iron. He'll—" "Get the worst beating he ever took in his life. Remember what I did to Thor?" "I do, and what they did to you afterward." "At your suggestion, Shalom, darling," I said. "I know, but these wild beasts, oh, Elohim. Here they come. Nathan, don't. I'll die. I'll lose my baby." Go inside then, I said. Don't watch. And when they bring you? In there all bloody and broken and dead? She whispered. I thank you for your confidence in me, Shulamith, I said. Then I whirled her arm around and smacked her bottom smartly with the palm of my hand, propelling her through the tent flap. Yeshua bar Abbas saw that and roared with laughter. At least you know how to handle women, don't you, boy? He said. And weapons, I said. Look, good captain, let's place some conditions on the outcome of this contest. He stared at me. His nostrils twitched. Such as, he said, if I win, I want 3 things. Your promise to send Shulamith back home to Caesarea. She's gravid, and hence of no use to me. It is our custom to abstain from women in that state. Done, he said. He knew nothing of Zedekim customs, so he was willing to take my word for it. In truth, we do have a custom, but it is far from always held to. And your second condition is? That I be allowed to train the boys. Agreed, he said. By Sheol, you can do that even if you don't win, if your showing's good enough. It's a chore I don't have time enough for, really. I saw then, with some relief, that he meant neither to kill nor maim me. And the third, he growled, that I be allowed to ride at your side when you go forth to war, I said. He shook his big bushy black head. No, he said. That, no. You're too valuable to us in one piece. Sheol Bar Yehuda. What do I gain by whacking you about the way I'm going to? I grinned at him. Send Claudia another finger. Ask for twice as much, I said. The outcome was a foregone conclusion. I had been trained by experts. He not at all. It was like the bull slayer's art. The beast enormously greater strength counts for naught against the speed, the skill, the intelligence of the man. I won't bore you with the details of it. It's enough to say that I bloodied him all over with dozens of spear-point pricks, nettled him with the tent cloth, tripped him with the spear shaft, hurtling him to earth where he was trying to fight free of it. But the spear point against his throat held him there. "'S not fair," he roared. "'Tis magician's trickery. Why—" I took the spear away. "Get up," I said. Then I turned to one of his decurions. I suppose I'll have to call them, though how many they command I truly do not know. "Give me a sword and a shield," I said. "Armor?" the man asked. "No, just the gladius and your shield." "I don't need more," I said. I didn't know that Shulamith had come back out of the tent, and it would have made no difference if I had known. I gave them a dazzling exhibition of Lenista-trained swordsmanship. I touched him at will, while he, great-thewed, sweating, panting, winded, slow, could not lay a blade on my naked hide. He stepped back, threw down his shield, his sword. "You win, Bar Yehuda," he panted. "By Sheol, I've never seen the like." Then he stepped up to me and almost crushed me in his great embrace. When he released me, I turned and saw Shalom lying on the ground. She had seen the last of the desperate thrust from such an angle as to make it seem to her that he had me and had fainted dead away. I'd never known her to show a jot of weakness before. Tears, fury, passion, yes, but weakness, no. Her condition was responsible for it now, I supposed. She kissed me goodbye with a soft, sweet tenderness that sent pain screaming through my veins. I helped her up on the white mare, watched her ride away. I'll never see her again, I thought. I was wrong. It was not to end like that, neither so cleanly nor so well. God or fate, whichever you believe in, or the malicious, mindless, perverse, blind accidentality that I'd swear rules life, is, as all of human history demonstrates, simply not that kind. I am, as my father always said, a fool. But I have two qualities which have always served me almost as well as intelligence: a retentive memory and a great curiosity about the why and how of things. And now, as I set about training the zealot boys, they served me well. By the very nature of things, the zealot brigands had to be poorly armed, their only weapons being those they could make themselves or steal. Now the Romans, as you Greek did before them, rather despise light-armed missile troops. I don't mean they despise the use of missiles, far from it. Their employment of the various forms of catapultes, of huge stone and fire dart throwing artillery, has never been equaled by any other nation. But slingers and archers they give no importance to, largely, it seemed to me, because among them both were so ludicrously, pitifully inadequate. No less than inadequate. Bad. There were two exceptions to this rule. Whenever they could, they enlisted Numidian and Scythian archers into the ranks of the legions. In the hands of the great blacks and in those of the slant-eyed Asiatic barbarians, the bow was a terrible weapon. I've seen, at the games, a Numidian slay a lion with but a single arrow, and the Scythians could drive their iron-pointed etrusci through a bronze breastplate with ease. But Roman and Greek archers are so bad that any good javelin thrower among them can achieve greater range with his light spear than the bowmen do with their arrows, which was why it seemed to me that a first-class troop of cataphracts was precisely what we needed to beat the Romans. To try to fight men equipped with the world's best weapons, trained all their lives in hand-to-hand combat, was folly. No, our only chance against them was to slaughter them from afar, rain arrows down upon them from a distance so great that their formations could be broken up before they ever reached us. Therefore, I set myself the task of producing a good copy of the long Numidian's bow, or the short, double-curving, terribly powerful Scythian one, which only the strongest men could pull. Do you know what happened? I failed completely. The materials for the manufacture of such splendid weapons just were not available in my country. Judea is sand and rock, with almost no trees. The ones that do grow there produce a rigid, sun-baked wood that is brittle, has no elasticity. Oh, it's good enough for javelin shafts, for spears, but for making bows it's useless. In Galilee, well-watered Galilee, I might have done it. But I wasn't in Galilee. I was in Judea. Sorrowfully, I put that idea by. My boys were good slingers. They often killed desert hares with their stones. I improved the sling, made the thongs longer, taught them to select carefully the roundest, smoothest stones. But to hit hard enough to kill a man, you need something far heavier than a stone in your sling. I knew, of course, that hundreds of years ago your Greek slingers used molded leaden bullets in their slings. And when one of those murderously heavy leaden balls struck a man on the forehead, he died. Any other place they hit him, they left him crippled. But I hadn't any lead either. So the slings remained an annoyance, a toy. I was in despair. To train these splendid, beautiful youths as lanista swordsmen was to condemn them to death. There was no way at all to provide the logistics which supports a Roman legion. Say I could get them to equal a legionary's skill with javelin, heavy spear, gladius, shield. It would make no difference, unless I could supply them with the weapons in quantity and quality to equal the legions and procure enough of perfectly trained, perfectly armed young fighters to outflank at least a cohort. It was assassination to send them into battle. And I had neither the weapons nor the numbers of men. I was thinking about that when I chanced upon a crooked piece of root lying on the ground. Something in its shape intrigued me. It looked like a reclining capital letter L. I picked it up, a dim memory prickling me. But it was all of 2 days later before it came to me. One of my foster father's friends, famed as a traveler, had described in Caius's house in Rome how a tribe of smallish African blacks, not quite dwarfs, but almost, hunted gazelles, brought them down on the run with a combination of a throwing stick and a spear. A throwing stick. This, my letter L. I could see in my mind's eye the drawing he had made of that curious weapon. You pass a loop of leather thong through a hole bored in the longer end. Wrap the thong about your wrist. You rest the butt end of the javelin against the upright short bar of the L. You hold the throwing stick lightly with all the fingers of your right hand, except the thumb and forefinger, which alone lightly clasp the javelin's shaft. Then you throw, releasing the javelin only, not your L-shaped throwing stick. The vertical bar of the L catches the butt of the shaft, whips against it with a force at least triple of what you could manage to put behind your cast without it, sends the slender shaft whistling through the air to achieve a range rivaling that of the arrows of the Scythian bowmen. I tried it. It worked. It worked beautifully. I could double my best range by using the throwing stick. I set my boys to manufacturing throwing sticks and a lighter, longer javelin. I made them practice with this new combination weapon from morning until night. Betimes I taught them sword play, which they loved, holding javelin, throwing rather cowardly, but I insisted upon javelin practice with those L-shaped sticks. Yeshua bar Abbas watched it, grunted, "Not bad," and rode off to raid a Roman supply train. No sooner had his troop disappeared behind the hills than a sentry from the Sebastian cavalry wing rode into sight, raising a cloud of dust visible to us from some 20 stadia away. It was hopeless. There was no doubt that those horsemen from the Alla Sebastitorium had seen us. Against the golden sands our black tents were visible from even that far away. They had, I discovered later, been sent out to search for me by Claudia's express command. She missed me, wanted me back, was sure she could keep me as her tame beast, useful bedfellow, amusing lover pet as long as she wanted to now, and as openly, because she had found a way to tying Pilatus's hands, of making him absolutely powerless to gainsay her. I assembled my boys, commanded the women, including the charming little bedmate Barabbas had cheerfully assigned me. Why describe her? She didn't matter. She was complacent, dutiful, good in bed, that's all. And, besides, I cannot call anything else about her to mind. To take themselves and the children to the rocky hills behind the camps. I sent 10 boys to bear the water and the food, and to serve as guards, the weakest, least reliable boys. The rest I kept. Then we retreated to some rocky outcroppings to the left of the camp and waited for the Roman cavalry to come close enough. In that natural fortress, I could stand off an army. From the highest rock of all, I killed the centurion leading the Sebastians with a single javelin hurled over a distance so great that I myself could scarcely believe my luck when I saw him reel from the saddle with that shaft protruding from his throat. At once the Sebastians were thrown into confusion. Watching them, I thanked my stars. It was they, provincial conscripts, we were confronting, and not members of the cohors italica. They hadn't even seen where that spear had come from. They milled about, tugging at the bridles. The horses neighed shrilly, and that gave me an idea. Aim for their mounts, I commanded. A horse is a much bigger and easier target to hit than a man. Besides, in the Roman cavalry, the mounts bore no armor. My youths fitted the javelins into the notched hooks of the throwing sticks, bent their glorious, sun-blackened bodies far back, hurled the slender shafts upward, retaining their grips on those wickedly simple javelin launchers, so that the throwing sticks whipped around 180 degrees of arc, still glued to the butts of the javelins, adding all the tremendous propulsive force to them before the singing spears left them, flew free. Below us, the carnage was terrible. The horses screamed like women. Through their riders bolted. Within minutes, it had turned into a stampede, when Barabbas, after whom I'd seen one of the younger women, wild as she-hawks themselves, riding one of the half-tamed mares of our herd, got back. All he could do was half crush my ribs with his bear hug, and to set his brigands to poniarding the wounded Romans. Because we wouldn't have time to take prisoners, they would slow us too much. And now we had to get out of that particular stretch of desert fast. 2 weeks after that, Barabbas scouts found the bag of gold we'd demanded as my ransom in a certain hole in the rocks not far from the Essenes monastery at Kubert Qumran, where they'd instructed the Epitropus emissaries to leave it. In parting, Barabbas shed tears before them all, kissed me, called me brother. Then they broke camp again, put the reins of a magnificent mare in my hands, for like the Bedouin, the zealot brigands favored mares as mounts over both geldings and stallions, and rode away, leaving me alone there in the desert. I watched that brave and gallant crew of brigands, ruffians, Sicarii, murderers, who were Israel's only hope, who were to be the cause of her despair, until they were out of sight. Then I mounted and rode down to Qumran, to the monastery of the Essenes, where my escort of Decapolians awaited me. A whole century, armed to the teeth, my captivity was over. Or was it? Had it not truly just begun? For that night, after I'd given commands to my work crew to demolish the half-stadi of aqueduct they had built during my absence, getting the pitch hopelessly wrong so that the water would have ceased to flow, I was sitting in my tent with my friend Aristides, telling him neither the truth nor the romance he wanted to hear, but rather a judicious mixture of both, with enough pure, unadulterated lies added to cement the whole fanciful structure together, when a strange legionary was escorted to my tent by the sentries. Strange to the Decapolians, that is. I knew him at once. The centurion, Costobar, commander of that century from the cohors Sebastinorum that had been assigned to Claudia as her special guards. He saluted me and handed me the scroll. As I opened it, a cloud of perfume rose about my head. That scent became doubly maddening, because besides being Claudia's own, it was the kind she'd taught Shulamith to use. In many a romance you will find a lyrical passage in which a whiff of scent reminds a lover of his dearly beloved, but even in this, reality crossed and cursed me. The perfume that will haunt my nostrils till I die awakes in my memory the image of not one woman, but two, and worse. When I tried to counteract its insidious effect by calling Helvetia's favorite scent to mine, I found to my abysmal shame and disgust that I could no longer remember it. The reason, of course, for that sad state of affairs was simple. Neither as her father's daughter nor as my wife had poor little Helvy had the money to buy a scent that any slave girl couldn't have worn. He bought what was cheapest, during our last days together, an attar of roses, but its odor was not distinctive. I do not remember it. Now, as I looked up, I met Aristides' delightful half-mocking grin. He was not envious. Vicariously, I think, he enjoyed my affairs more than he did his own rather base and boring conquest, which consisted of slave girls, whores, and adulterous wife of a merchant traveler, female riff-raff of that sort. He had seen Shulamith, seen how she'd half devoured me when we met, which was enough to cause him, as far as women were concerned, to freely award me the victor's palm. And now this missive, brought by a full centurion, penned in a hand that half a glance showed him was the daintiest of feminine scripts, and in Greek at that. He leaned over my shoulder, shamelessly. "Aristides," I said. He drew away from me with an injured look, but then that dull ass of a centurion spoiled all my precautions. "The Lady Claudia," said I, "was to bring an answer, my lord," he said. I glanced at Aristides. He was hugging himself with pure, if unholy, glee. I sighed, long and deeply. "Tell her I hear and obey," I said. That night, out of sheer necessity, disobeying my father and Pilatus both, I rode up to Jerusalem, entering it not by the Damascus, nor Solomon's, nor any of the principal other gates, but by the Dung Gate, through which, after midnight, the carts carried away mountains of human offal to be buried or burned. I chose that entrance because it was by it that I ran the smallest risk of accidentally encountering anyone I knew, but also because it seemed to me a singularly appropriate entrance. That was what I felt like. Dung. A slave girl opened the door of the house to which Claudia's letter had directed me. I followed her through ghostly, silent passages to her mistress's bedchamber. She opened the door. I entered, and stood there, just inside it, unbreathing, shocked beyond the use of speech. The girl had came towards me was almost unrecognizable as the Claudia I had known. She was no longer slender, she was skeletal. Her eyes peered out of their sockets as from a death's head, a skull. Her cheeks were inhollowed, her lips bluish. In her bare arms, her shoulders, I could count every bone she had. I had the feeling I could encircle her throat with the thumb and forefinger of one hand. An exaggeration, of course, but not as great a one as you may think. I hung there, staring at her. "Nathan," she breathed. "Oh, Nathan." Then in one wild rush she was in my arms. I held the long, slow quiver of her to me, feeling down to my bones' bitter marrow the way she cried. I had been the cause of too much female sorrow already in my life. I had believed Claudia beyond the reach of any emotion more profound than lust. But now I saw that I'd been wrong. I was not Yeshua ha-Notzri's twin for nothing. I shared, in lesser measure, of course, his awful, terrifying power to inspire love. "Don't," I whispered. "Don't, Claudia. I'm not worth—" She pushed away from me a little, stood there looking up at me, peering at me, really trying to discern my face through the wild white curtain of tears that surely walled it out. "Not worth crying over, you mean?" she said quietly, almost calmly. "To me, you're worth everything, even the life you almost cost me." I stood there looking at her, and a quivering stole along my limbs. I was held in the grip of winter frost, iron chill. Don't get me wrong. I didn't do this on purpose, Nathan. She said then, quickly, "I am not the heroine your Helvetia was. I'm a selfish, spoiled little bitch to whom nothing and nobody matters. I wouldn't prick my little finger for any man alive, not even you, or so I thought. Only my body knew better. I knew that it hurt all over inside and out from wanting you, so it refused food. Not I, Nathan. It. My dumb beast body, starving for your caresses, ravenous to engorge, to be impaled upon your hard male flesh. So it decided to starve itself in all ways, to end a suffering it couldn't bear. It, not me. I tried to eat, Nathan. I tried. I simply couldn't get food down. It wouldn't pass that knot of pure damn screaming agony in my throat. And what little I did force down, yep, right back up again. Pontius physician says I'm in a decline, that I'm going to die. I lost half a talent by weight already. I, who never in my life could afford to lose an ounce. Only now, the shaking in my limbs was noticeable now, even to her. I was remembering Helvy, remembering the awful rents she'd made in her white, sweet tender flesh. Because of me. And a grief, both new and old, sprung from triple sources. My Helvy metamorphosed into a bloated, unrecognizable mass of putrefaction. My Shelomit, gravid with another man's child. My Claudia, yes, my Claudia, reduced to this, rose up and blind scalded my eyes. I held her mouth against my cheek. It went away, and then it pressed. opened and quivering against the other. This was the medicine I needed, she said. We talked all night long, or rather Claudia talked, and I listened. Oh, I planned it so well, darling. Would you believe that hungry Iberian boar I married is capable of love? Well, he is, just as though he were actually human. Isn't he? I said. Human? No, of course not. From his brains, I'd say his mother was a sly and cunning vixen, but his father surely was some species of swine. Oh, he's clever enough, but the only real emotion he feels is ambition. He isn't even jealous of me. I could take the beast with two backs with half the Roman Empire, and he wouldn't care, as long as I was discreet enough not to wreck his chances. He's jealous of you, though, darling. You may be sure of that. Why? I said. Because he knows I love you, as distinct from doing this. Stop it, I said. You're not strong enough, Claudia. Aren't I? Just you wait, my lover. I'll give you such a demonstration that you'll beg for mercy. Later. Now I want to talk. Thank God, I said. Anyhow, I found out about the Myrtilene, a Greek, a former Hetara, married to one of our duchies, our generals. A slave at my orders, of course, stole at first draft of one of his letters to her. Actually, schoolboyish. The syrupy endearments in it would have turned your stomach. I'm listening, I said. So I had my loved and respected foster father, the more than divine Tiberius. He'll do anything to keep me quiet, you know, darling. Send her out here with her fat fool of a husband. You should have seen my Pontius, hopping from foot to foot like a schoolboy who wants to go to the latrine and dares not ask. He couldn't wait to send that fat fool, Malvidius, on extended tour of Idumea, Perea, Lower Judea, all the awful desert countries where he couldn't possibly take his wife along. Then I did my bet for the cause. I offered her a house I own in Jerusalem, telling Pontius at the same time that she got on my nerves, and I wanted her as far away from Caesarea and me as possible. A detail he was entirely prepared to believe, and which delighted him. I waited until I was sure, until my spies had brought me proof he was betting with her. Then I invited Vitellius. The governor of Syria, I said. Yes, you know how upright he is. I asked him to come and see me on an urgent matter. I am nobody, really, but I'm still the granddaughter of Caesar Augustus. So he came. I took him, with his guards, to her house. The house I had assigned to her. Even the slaves in it were my own. It wasn't a matter of breaking in. I had a duplicate key to every door, every closet. We stood in the doorway and watched them, bucking and gasping and pounding away. Zeus, what an ugly sight! It's not made for watching, I said. No, for doing, for participation, she said, and kissed me. We watched them for at least 5 minutes, no 10. With her, he was good. She screamed the roof down, like I do with you, darling. Claudia, please, I said. Then I put on the required performance. I swooned into the august governor's arms. There was a great deal of shouting. Vitellius was for placing Pontius under arrest and shipping him back to Rome. But I asked time to think it over, time to talk to my erring spouse. And you said to him, "Have fun, you lecherous swine, only I'm free too, understand? We're friends, you and I, Lucius Pontius. I'll help you get to the throne, sit there beside you, smiling your loving, dutiful wife, your divine empress, everywhere except in bed, which shouldn't trouble you. You have this greasy Greek slut, don't you? And I." He cut me off. You know what he said? No, I said. And you, my dearest, your cut-tipped little Jew, my engineer, whose skill extends beyond building watercourses. It would seem he also plugs them, doesn't he? "Claudie, in God's name," I said. "I know. He's vile. So am I fear. Only you are sweet, Nathan." And then she bent her head quite suddenly and cried. "Claudia," I said. That same night they brought the news that the zealots had seized you, carried you off. Pontius was sure they'd kill you. He'd had the brains beaten out of hundreds of people in Jerusalem over the accursed aqueduct, you know. He was terribly upset. It was awfully unflattering, but instead of being happy to see the man who'd cuckolded him killed, he put 3 whole cohorts out to search for you. And, I said, 2 days later, they brought me your letter. I didn't read it, Nathan, because when I opened the scroll, that awful, bloody, I lifted up my hand with my 10 fingers spread wide. What a filthy trick," she said. I threw up. Then I started screaming and rolling on the floor and tearing my hair out by the roots. Because that finger, with your ring on it, to me meant that you were dead. It never occurred to me to read the letter, or even that there was a letter. Pontius had his physician give me a sleeping potion. It didn't work. I lay there crying all night long. In the morning a servant brought me my breakfast. But by then my body, my poor, dumb beast body, that needs you more than it needs food or clothing or baths or ointments or perfumes, had already decided what to do, quite independently of me, entirely apart from my mind or will. I tried to get my breakfast down. It was like trying to eat a nest of serpents, trying to swallow offal. All my meals after that were the same. "Claudia," I said reproachfully, "you shouldn't have ever—" She smiled at me then. "I didn't want to live without you, Nathan, no more than your Helvetia did." "Oh, yes, I know about her. Poor little fool. What a thing to die over. The one part of us that can't be damaged, really. Did you think you'd leave her when you found out? Why? It wasn't her fault. I don't see—" "No," I said. "She had a conception of herself that was very high, Claudia, almost as high as the one I had of her. She knew that purity is not just a word, that our bodies, hers and mine, were temples, sacred to each other's worship, and hence not to be profaned, which is why she lay there looking at me, and now her eyes eclipsed her tiny emaciated face. "You have never loved anyone else," she whispered. "Why, you can't. That's it, isn't it, Nathan?" "That's it," I said. She went on looking at me. Then she raised up and found my mouth. For the first time since I'd known her, she didn't kiss me like a hungry she-beast ferociously grinding mouth on mouth. Instead, she clung her lips to mine as lightly as a breath, slow-moving, salt with tears, while her fingers moved with awful, lacerating tenderness amid my close-cropped, dark, wiry hair. She drew back at last, and let the endless white star tracks pencil her face. "They had to force-feed me like a German goose, finally. To save me, Nathan," she whispered. And now I wonder why. What for? Oh, Claudia, I groaned. She seemed at me then through her tears. She smiled at me then through her tears, except maybe to prove that I have love enough in me for both of us, she said slowly. And that this temple, ruined, ravaged, violated, profaned, before it knew the unknown God it was dedicated to, is sacred to your worship still. That it will always be, as long as there's life and breath and blood and hunger in me. Oh, Nathan, I took her in my arms then, and we made love, very gently and with great tenderness. In some ways, that was the greatest sin of all.